It's a late night ramble again because I want to try and formulate something which has been in my mind for weeks, it's probably months now. And again, in relation to our group, and again, which arose from some kind of communications I've had with our Thomases, and also our group discussions and ideas around the good evil binary and what that means in a situation where everyone sees things differently. Using the example of politics and certain conflicts and wars in the world, we must acknowledge that there are people on the side that we might perceive as, if not evil, then wrong or opposite to us, who equally believe themselves to be on the side of good and the right. Everyone has a different view. You can have many good people who can look at the same problem and have very different views on them, on what the solution is and what's even the nature of the problem is. So much depends on our perception, which comes from personal experience and our very DNA, our situation in life. So much goes towards a perception, so much experience. We can't possibly understand fully what it is that goes into forming another person's viewpoint. Everything in their history and being up to that moment contribute to the formation of that view, and so it is with us as well. And furthermore, our view can change. As was intimated in my last video or recording, one of the reasons that our teachers gave for not wanting to acknowledge a good evil as being truly binary, they didn't believe there could be absolute because the context was always changing, and that something that was deemed good in one moment could be deemed not good in the next. And so therefore it's very difficult to nail a certain action, event, phenomena onto one side of the pole or into a fixed position. And if we stick with the examples of war and politics, we see how the sands shift. If I take, for example, the war between Russia and Ukraine, I use this example because I personally have experienced many shifting viewpoints on this conflict. From before it began to the start of it, partway through it, listening to the views of others, seeing how situations change, discovering more, discovering less. I've had a very wide range of viewpoints on that conflict. I've been at certain times more for Russia, at certain times more for Ukraine, in certain respects for Russia, in other respects for Ukraine. And now there are more changes still. And rather than particularly being on one side or another, I rather have a sense of unease that we're mirroring a situation that we were in just over 100 years ago. at the start of World War One, when a whole unlikely series of circumstances conspired to make that the worst of times. And it was very much to do with, well, things coming to a head in various fields, spheres of influence, but also the peculiarities relating to the leaders of different countries at that time, which conspired to create a unique set of circumstances. You know, the mad Kaiser and his massive sense of enmity towards Britain, whereas henceforth, in the Victorian era, Britain and Germany were on very friendly terms thanks to the marriage of Victoria and Albert, and intermarriages between, you know, other members of the royal families. And also in Russia with the peculiar volatile situation surrounding the Tsar and Rasputin, what the attempts on his life meant. Rasputin being one of the only people that might have stopped Russia going to war. And there was a whole set of circumstances, and if any one of these things hadn't happened, you know, before we even get to Franz Ferdinand, then the war wouldn't have happened. And I just see so many things. I just feel like there are echoes. Of course, we're not exactly 100 years away from World War One or World War Two. Our 100 years would be the period between them, the 1920s, under depression, economic depression. Anyway, I'm going off a bit on a tangent because what was really the subject I wanted to talk about was, or to emphasize, was that these differences in view and perception, the different sides we might unconsciously or not be able to help ourselves but take, even if it's not intellectual but emotional and just undefinable. Whilst for matters, certain matters of magical and spiritual work, it's crucial to be of one mind, one aim, single-pointed, and therefore equally essential to aim the blow precisely and very well, to concentrate on the right thing. That's one thing. I also think it's really important that we're able between us as a group, as a collective, to encompass as many viewpoints as possible. Now, this isn't just some sort of homage to diversity. And what that has come to mean in our world where everything is politicized. It's because of the value of the perspective this affords us in a group. Our single point is in the center. Let's say that single point is Christ. If you don't happen to be Christian, let's call it Christ consciousness or divine consciousness, and alignment to the will of the divine. Let that be our anchor, our central point. And this fulcrum is on a higher plane. It's overarching. It overrides any differences of perspective we have. And so at any moment in time, we can retreat backwards and upwards to that point, that mission, that goal of unification with divine will, of Christ consciousness, divine consciousness, and alignment with the universal will of God. That's our central point. That's our point of support. And we must be very firm about this point of support. We must always have it in mind. Imagine we're deep sea divers with a line that goes to the surface. We never want to lose connection with that point above us as we deep dive. And anytime we feel ourselves losing ground or becoming disorganized or pulled one way, pulled another, pulled into conflict or antagonism, just remember that we all have a shared point above us, which is the divine will, which completely overrides any differences in viewpoint and perspective within our group. Now, this is important because we're to consciously explore. If you see that we have from this central point, around it is a circle, 360 degrees. And at every point in that circle, we can stand looking outwards at a different perspective. We can stand looking east, west, north, south, and at other points around that circle. Actually, within the Avalonian tradition, as perhaps in some other traditions, when we do one of our extremely rare rituals, which is almost always to welcome a new member to our circle, then each of us adopts a place on this magical circle, a direction to sit in, so that all these directions are covered as we welcome the new person to us. Now, we tend to stay in the same position, but sometimes we'll move. I've been in positions in the west and the south, for example, just for the purposes of that group. And it's interesting how the perspective differs from a different position. So for us, as we find, and there's a lot of us, quite a lot of us in this group, there's about 40 of us in total. I'm not sure if we're all active. Let's say about half of us are active. It's still a fair number of people. And whilst I suspect there's people tend to broadly array into right and left, don't they? But we want to be so much more than that because we have a circle to cover. And between us, we want to cover all bases. We want to be able to, from our central point of unity, to have as wide a possible perspective as possible. Because this is the way that we gain the most knowledge and information. We have the best chance of bringing truth back to the centre. We have lookout posts. We look out, and our position is not, our mission is not to nail a flag to a certain point on that circle and stay there fixed. No, our fixed point is the central point, the union with the divine will. The circle is something we should be able to move around. And also, at this juncture, we'll remind ourselves that we don't have a closed circle. Because this is a Christian circle, or a white magical circle if you prefer, there's always a doorway in and out. We form a living spiral. The doorway is Christ, consciousness, the divine. So we're not locked into place. There's always an escape route. And this circle is something we should be able to move around so that we bring back this information to our center. Now, for some people, looking out from the left will feel far more comfortable than looking out from the right, and vice versa. And it could well be that, if there's 20 of us, or 30 or 40, that we manage to cover the circle naturally. It could be that, there is such a variety and diversity of views that between us all, we manage to pretty much equally cover that circle with our perspectives. It would be unbalanced, as I'm sure you'll see looking at it this way, for us all to be amassed in one quarter. Because the goal is resolution, synthesis. So you see, we're in a situation where war is imminent. In one respect, it's difficult not to pick a side because we all have a country. We all have families and friends and interests. Spiritually, our goal as a metasis, as light workers, is to assist in the work of bringing about resolution, peace, not surrender, not capitulation, not surrender in the terms of one being overcome. Peace, true resolution in an upward synthesis, not a downward, unholy mixture, which is the worst of worlds. We seek the best of worlds. And in seeking a truth, our varied perspectives are crucially important, because you can't resolve binaries and achieve a transcendent synthesis without the gift of black perfection, drawing light from darkness, from beyond the reaches of the furthest poles, into the realm of the unknown. So we need to have this freedom of movement around this circle of perspective, to see things differently, flexible and fluid, and to be very appreciative if we have someone who is perhaps an outlier. What if we couldn't help it, but most of us were just aligned into one quarter or another, and we didn't want to move? In this sense, it would be valuable for us if there was somebody who was able to see the view from the other side. It might be difficult for that person and for the group facing them, but in terms of what, the group itself would be in a better position because of that view than if it wasn't there and if we only all were looking in one direction, because then who watches your back? So I think that's all I wanted to say now about perspective. and views outward from the circle. Except perhaps that imagine yourself sitting, standing, being at a point on the circle which has a view outwards. Our point of support is the divine, it's the light. Olive Pixley describes it in all her exercises. This is the point of support also that is described in the works of Moebius and Nina Runnakova and Chmakov. It's above light. So whilst we use the analogy of deep sea diving, actually we're up in space with this. We're above a plane slightly above the earth, looking outward. So take up a station on that circle. Look out across the world. What do you see? What do you see? Just meditate on what you see from your position. And report back to us on what you see. Now, in terms of level, rather than describe day-to-day events as they might be reported in the newspaper or what you're reading or thinking on that level, try and go a degree above. For example, maybe you simply see a horizon. Maybe you see the sun rising on the horizon and that's what you see. Maybe you see the sun setting. Maybe you see clouds. So do you understand what I'm saying? Think of the atmosphere and what you see in the atmosphere. Just see what comes to mind. Don't think too hard. Let your mind be clear. Just use your inner eye. And maybe all you see is blue sky, that's fine as well. But we're on the lookout. And I want to know what you can see. Thank you.